we don't have enough shelter beds, and that, some women's best is keeping their kids warm in their car overnight, and we really had to learn early on that you can be homeless and still care for your children and provide for them in a way that's dignified. And sometimes for us, that looks like we're giving out blankets and we're giving out gas cards so that you can stay warm overnight. That's not the ideal preferred situation, but that's going to keep you alive. And so some of those are not some of the things that I expected to face. I mean, having less than 100 shelter beds alone is impactful. We don't talk enough about violence is the leading cause of homelessness for women, and many of them are fleeing unsafe situations, whether physical or sexual abuse.
Welcome to today's podcast episode. We're honored to be joined today by Amy Meredith. Amy is an author. She's a keynote speaker, consultant, co-founder, entrepreneur, CEO of Up for Women and Children. And Amy, thank you so much for spending the time. You're so busy, and we really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you. No, thanks for having me. I love the opportunity to speak on podcasts, especially when I get to advocate for women and families. So thank you for having me.
One of the things that's interesting, and I want to get started kind of around this notion of us. Well, presently we're in the midst of all the holiday hustle and bustle and lights flashing and people, Amazon orders and gifts and friendsgiving and holiday celebrations and those kinds of things. And it's a very joyous time. But for a lot of folks, it's not. I mean, it's a time where certainly the traumas that they're feeling and the things that they're going through don't go away. And actually, the holidays can accentuate some of those anxieties and trauma. In the experience that you've had at Up for Women, and I really do want to get into the details of what Up for Women do, but in your experience over the last 7 or 8 years with Up for Women, what does it feel like? What are you seeing in the folks that you serve that are unhoused, especially during this time of the holidays?
I think, thank you for asking that question. It's an important one because I think the holidays are especially complex. First of all, I'm always continually amazed by the gratitude of the people that we serve, the women and families. They are always just so thankful for our space and for the services that we provide. And it's just really, it's a really sweet reminder and reflection of this work at a time when the holidays are really magnified for a lot of people. At a time it's magnifying hope, but also hardship. It is time that's a season of abundance and community and family and connection for many folks. It's a reminder of what's lost and what they don't have in that moment. And that's really heavy and hard. We've seen that a lot from families here. And so it can be a whole range of emotions that come up this time of year.
So you have had a long career before founding Up for Women in the business world as entrepreneurial businesses, which we know there's lots of challenges. Personally, I found that in my time with St. Vincent de Paul in the nonprofit sector is probably even more difficult, than the times that I spent in the for-profit world. Very
Yeah.
entrepreneurial, always having to make decisions. The ends never meet, all those kinds of things. But I want to applaud you for making that shift and founding Up for Women. Since 2018, I think your website shows that you've served more than 5,500 folks, and you're doing it
hmm
every day,
hmm
and you're out there doing the hard work. Tell us a little bit about what Up for Women are doing, and I especially like the fact that we're doing this is going to air during the holiday season, so that for folks that are
Yeah.
looking for opportunities to support and give back, certainly Up for Women is going to be a wonderful place for them to do that. But tell our listeners a little bit about what Up for Women is all about.
Yeah, so thank you. We kind of came to fill a gap that existed in the community. There wasn't a women's only daytime safe space. There were spaces for the men. We're familiar with St. John, but women had nowhere to go during the day. And because of their experience with trauma, women needed a women's only safe space. And so we wanted to operate as a hub. We know that transportation is a barrier for folks, and that by bringing a variety of services here, that can really help meet their needs because we have anywhere between 3 to 6 partner providers on site in any given shift. So we offer a daytime safe space, access to laundry for some of our most fragile guests. We have access to a mailing address. You know, you don't get that in overnight shelter, a phone, a computer and internet for applying for jobs. And then we really our case management piece really works with women to meet them where they are, and see what individual goals they're trying to meet, how we can help support them on their journey. But then the reality is also probably about 30% of the people we serve are very fragile in crisis and simply aren't ready to work anything with case management. They may just need to rest for the day, to get something to eat. The streets are a very unsafe place, particularly for women, and many of them stay awake at night for safety, so they're resting here in the day.
But I'm just curious, like before you co-founded up, what had been your experience with homelessness and how has that evolved over the last 7, 8 years? I'm sure it has. But just
Yes. Thank you for that question. I guess my degrees were in psych and justice administration. And then, like Dave mentioned, I took more of an entrepreneurial route. My grandfather had launched a manufacturing and import business. And, he's like, come work with me. I'll show you everything I know. And if you don't like it, you can leave, basically. And so that's where I like to say I got my MBA. It was invaluable, incredible experience that helped bring all the business side that I needed to launch this organization. But my homelessness experience, I wouldn't say that I had much, but I will say, which we could talk about later, I've done a lot of reflecting in the last 7 or 8 years and thinking about how different supports and privileges and things I've had in my life have kept me out of homelessness. And that's just not the case for everybody. I think that's important to talk about too.
You had mentioned, Amy, about the shelter, the work that you do are serving women, and that the streets are a dangerous place for women. I personally learned more about that myself in the time that I spent
Hmm.
with St. Vincent de Paul. St. Vincent de Paul does have transitional shelter for women, and also permanent supportive housing as well, where there's a lot of women with families that are there. Um, you know, the stats every year show that, you know, 43% or so of those that are unhoused in Louisville are women. The number is probably higher
Hmm.
than that because of, and I've seen on your website, there's a great piece in your website about the barriers that women are facing and some of the reasons why they aren't going into shelter.
Hmm.
And there's many reasons for that. So the number is probably higher than that.
Hmm.
But maybe you can talk to some of those challenges that women face in homelessness, and of course, what you all do from the daytime perspective is so important to that. But that's certainly something that I think people probably don't fully understand.
Sure. Well, I think, just there's a lot more predatory behavior, towards women. And many women are coming from, there's women that have aged out of foster care, women who have come from unstable, unsafe home environments where they didn't learn autonomy, boundaries, basic levels of respect. I say a lot of times that a good support system will make or break you. And a lot of the people that we serve here, they just simply didn't have somebody advocating for them, loving on them, supporting them. And that makes a big difference. So particularly for women, they can be especially vulnerable in that way. And there's often, untreated mental illness. And it's just kind of a compound effect. And then if you throw in motherhood, I don't know if you all have children, but the difference of even just getting yourself out the door to go somewhere, whether you're alone or if you have 1, 2, or 3 or 4 children in tow, it's a much different timeline and game, and that's huge, I think. And that is something that we see with some of the women and families that visit us. Sometimes if they're in an emergency overnight shelter, they might have been able to find a friend they can leave their kids with there so that they can come here and work more, diligently towards their case management because it's a lot. Kids need structure and routine, and homelessness definitely lacks that, and so it's just the odds are stacked against them to get where they're going. I mean, fundamentally, even just, the workday was designed till 5 o'clock and school gets out at 3 or 4. And who's responsible for that? We were. So it's just, there's a lot of, disproportionate disadvantages that I think people just don't really think about.
Yeah, and when we had author Kevin Adler on, and Dave and I have talked about this a bunch, the idea of relational poverty, and like you said, when
Hmm.
you do not have a support system, it matters. We talk a lot about obviously the financial components of homelessness, but just as important is that relational poverty. You talked a lot about the unique challenges that women are facing, especially with children. I mean, just being in this for 7, 8 years, not I know you didn't have experience with homelessness, but what have you seen, or maybe some of the myths that you see that our community, um, has about women and children who face homelessness, and even for your own personal journey over the last 7, 8 years leading this organization, what have you seen are some of the myths or
Yeah.
misconceptions? Yeah.
Well, I think, I think it's important that people understand one, that, we don't have enough housing. We don't have enough shelter beds, and that, some women's best is keeping their kids warm in their car overnight, and we really had to learn early on that you can be homeless and still care for your children and provide for them in a way that's dignified. And sometimes for us, that looks like we're giving out blankets and we're giving out gas cards so that you can stay warm overnight. That's not the ideal preferred situation, but that's going to keep you alive. And so some of those are not some of the things that I expected to face. I mean, having less than 100 shelter beds alone is impactful. And then, uh, often we don't talk enough about violence is the leading cause of homelessness for women, and many of them are fleeing unsafe situations, whether physical or sexual abuse. And sometimes they have a perpetrator that's following them, or that might be an otherwise an emergency shelter, and that will keep them out of shelter. There's a lot of reasons for women not to go into shelter, and a lot of them are regarding safety.
Yeah, we have a couple of, well, we have a domestic violence transitional shelter as well as rapid rehousing, and we serve um, a little over 100, folks, or 100 women and children as well as male. We have a small percentage of male that we serve, and you're right, it is. There are safety issues, and we are grateful to serve that population because, I mean, domestic violence is one of the leading causes for women becoming, homeless. Uh, for you guys at Up, how key is just the wraparound services? I know everybody's at a different spot, and so it sounds like you guys are able to meet them where they're at. Like you said, if
Yeah.
you're just giving gas cards so that they can keep their children, warm, versus some of those that are maybe a little bit further along in their kind of self-sufficiency journey. How do you guys navigate the complex issues of the families you serve?
Well, kind of on a case by case basis. Unfortunately, over the last year and a half, we've been able to expand our programming to include more of housing piece, where we are able to do some rapid rehousing for people fleeing domestic violence, and then also our family programming because we started seeing increasing numbers of children, more so than we had in the beginning. Because in the earlier years, many women had maybe already lost their children to state's care or left them with a friend or relative while they were trying to get back on their feet. But then we started consistently seeing more children. And last summer, I think there was a day we saw as many as 35 in one day. So just kind of shifting our model to better support families how we can, and then really working towards getting that funding for our own rents to get people housed, because we know that housing can provide the stability. And so providing that with the intensive case management has been a helpful next step for us, to be able to get towards part of the solution, right? And that long-term case management to help keep them housed. But really, it is a kind of a case by case basis. And some days they just need a friendly face. We really work to treat people with dignity, call them by name, give them a warm smile, welcome them, tell them we're glad that they're here. And some days just being that space is enough. And then other days we're working on bigger things. We bring in partners like legal aid, SNAP, different healthcare provider partners, the common assessment, mental health supports. We try to get as much as we can, just to help make the most impact for them.
Yeah, that word compassion, dignity, our mission is to house, feed, and support those in need, but with compassion and dignity. And I think seeing, the unhoused population, whether individuals or families, and recognizing they have hard stories, but to offer, again, compassion and dignity to see them. And like you said, just to even put a smile on their face
Yeah.
goes a long way. And it's great to hear that that is an emphasis of your mission. Um, which, by the way, I think we lost Dave.
I didn't know if he was
But
frozen on your end too or
yeah,
not.
he's frozen, and he said his connection went out. In your role, you are, transitioning, it looks like in early 2026. And, I'm sure that was a tough decision.
Yes. So I kind of really got to a place, and I almost touched on it with the previous question, but it's aside from, regular entrepreneurship, there's an added layer of responsibility in this type of human services work of caring for the team and the people that are meeting our guests where they are. There's so much vicarious trauma, and really supporting them is just a huge part of the work too. And then we've been a rapidly growing team. In just our last 2 years, we've doubled our expenses and revenue, and in 7 years have become a seven-figure organization. So that's huge. And I knew that I'm a creator, I'm a builder. My job was to help get this to a stable position with a solid team. And I realized that I wanted to be super thoughtful and give the next person enough time to learn the mission, learn the work, learn the people we serve, and learn our team, and be able to have space to just really kind of dig into that before they had to make sudden changes, and not at a time of crisis. Because, fortunately, we are in a space where we only have one set of federal funding right now. And if that is decreased, it just means we can pay less rents, which is very unfortunate. However, it's not going to directly shut down our day shelter. So, which is a lot better than a lot of other nonprofits can say right now. And so I just wanted to be really thoughtful in making sure that the next leader had enough time to give it the most, opportunity for success ahead of a transition.
Yeah. And well, you've been writing a book, so too, that takes that's a full-time job, if not with some overtime included, right? So
Yeah.
I'd love to hear a little bit about that, where the light breaks through. It just hit in October.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, and congrats on that. That's, I'm sure, many, many years of hard work.
Thank you. Yes, I love this story because I had a previous, it was like later in the pandemic, and I was over here just kind of, um, we had just separated and moved up to the third floor with some office spaces, and we had this new volunteer here. And I learned a few months later that she'd written a book, she completed a TED Talk, and she'd worked at Seven County Services, Samantha Perkins. She's amazing. And she became our interim shelter manager at the time. And so she carried us through a heavy season. And as she left, she started a writing workshop. And so I took her writing workshop with a few other CEOs, and together we wrote our memoirs. And it was kind of, we just had this committed weekly time where we kind of held each other accountable and kept showing back up. And so over a year and a half, we had other times we were writing as well, but that's how we did that. But I love that it came from somebody that had been on the up team, and it's just a really sweet story, I think. So
Well, hopefully you get to do a TED Talk as well soon.
yes, it's on the list. It's on the list. Thank you. So yeah, I got to release that last month, but haven't got to really promote it like I'd like yet. But I'll do some of that next year. But it's kind of like a motherhood and leadership memoir. It talks about my free range 1980s childhood, if you will, into kind of just my own healing journey and the story of like founding up and the growth. But also, really through that writing process, I identified just how this different circumstances in my life that I too could have been homeless had it not been for the supports, resources, education, and money that I had. I once had to file an emergency protective order and evacuate someone quickly from my life. And I lost my mother to ovarian cancer in my 20s and later ended up becoming guardian to my youngest sister. And I had never really thought about it from this lens and this seat, but I'm like, no, actually, these are the kind of things that can bring people to homelessness. So, and I spoke about that a little bit at our last fundraising event. And I just think it's really important that we humanize and tell these stories, because if not us, then someone in our circle has been super close to experiencing hopelessness, whether we want to talk about it or not. And I think that it's really important in a time when we're so divided that we are speaking up and out and telling those stories.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not us versus them.
Yeah,
Um,
no.
like you said, I mean, it's the idea of, 60% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. And they're one crisis away from hitting homelessness. I mean, that's a good amount of people in, the most abundant nation on the planet. So, and I love, it sounds like a really good book, and I encourage our listeners to check it out. And hopefully, like you said, when you get a little bit more time, you'll be able to promote that. I think I've seen a little bit about, or a little bit of your posts and how you've shared. Hey, you've had some good traction on that so far. Has your story really helped you to have more empathy or sympathy? We've talked about compassion for what you've done it up.
I think so, but I think that I've always had that. That's just kind of core of
Gotcha.
who I am. I'm an advocate, and I think that that's kind of exactly the reason why I am here.
Yeah, I get that. And did you ever, is writing up your alley, or was it a little bit hard to?
Oh, actually, yeah, very much so. Writing was a huge outlet for me as a teenager and
Yeah,
adolescent when I was younger. And
yeah,
then I kind of veered away from it after having kids. But I've always known I've had a book in me since I was a teenager. So,
gotcha.
yeah.
Um, well, thank you for sharing that. And I'd love to hear a couple more questions for you.
Yeah.
I'd like to go back a little bit to the holiday season. Again, we're so focused on our own, um, you know, families and friends and the gifts we've got to get for everybody, the parties, and this is I feel like the perfect time for people to be more intentional, though, to stop and think about those that are in need. For you guys at Up, what are ways that your supporters can step in and help what you guys are doing during the holidays?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. And I think if it's not up, if you're supporting someone else, just, please be supporting people. And then I think it's so important to see specifically what type of support do they need, because sometimes people think we need one thing but we actually need another. So I think it's really important to ask. So for us, we're always inviting people to follow along on our media platforms, to sign up for, we have like a every other month newsletter that shares about how we're serving. And then this time of year, we have our Amazon wish list with a lot of items. It is the giving season, and we really accumulate about 75% of our in-kind items for the year between October and December. And so we really rely heavily on that. And that's on our website at uplouisville.org. And we kind of keep that up to date. That makes it easy when people are shopping, they can just add items and send them there. And then we're also always looking for volunteers. Volunteers help, mail is one of our biggest services, and sorting the mail, filing the mail, and then pulling the mail for our guests as they arrive. We're serving an average of 100 plus women a day here, so we hand out a lot of mail. So those are good ways to help.
Yeah, what are some of the main things you feel like in terms of the women and children that you serve? Um, that puts, is it the Christmas gifts that puts a lot of pressure on them, or is it the lack of relational support? What are, I guess, some of the main struggles for families during the holidays? Is it just all of it? I'm just
I
curious.
think
Yeah.
when you're carrying the weight of survival in a season of celebration,
Mm,
it's just really
great
heavy,
point.
you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And so, yes, of course, people want to provide things for their children. But then the other reality is if you're in an emergency overnight shelter and you need to leave during the day, you have to often take your things with you. And so it just becomes this real complex situation. So I think it can be important to focus on how could you help a family have a meaningful experience, a nice meal, a time together. There are lots of things to do, but they cost money. But I think providing some sense of normalcy for a family could be huge. If that's what they want, and ask them. If you really want to help somebody, ask them how you could help them.
Yeah, it sounds like you're kind of saying, hey, we need to shoulder some of the weight that they're carrying. And like you
Yeah,
said, it is the simple things. I mean, we do a Thanksgiving, special Thanksgiving meal, a special Christmas meal. You said this early in the conversation that the thankfulness that those we serve as well is, I think those that are in need, those that have experienced homelessness are some of the most thankful people on the planet.
100%.
And they're so content. I think we complain about how busy we are, especially during the holiday season, and they're just thankful to get a meal, to be able to sit together as a family, and for us to be able to again cook, the turkey and the ham and all the fixings, and for them to come and sit down. Um, it's powerful, it's special, it's rewarding. How have you guys, by the way, dealt with, or how have you seen your families, deal with some of the food insecurity issues that we faced over the last month? Has it been
Yeah,
hard?
well, a little bit, and honestly, that's one that the team can answer a little bit better than me right now because a lot of our people are, in shelter or, and we keep items on hand, but then we have great partnerships with folks like Feed Louisville, and then we have been amplifying. We have a pretty good resources page on our website, so we're trying to keep it up to date for how people can get food and extra things that they need, including seasonal support. People can sign up to get support from Salvation Army for Angel Tree and things like that, but a lot of times you also have to provide birth certificates for your kids and the documentation. And if you're a woman fleeing an unsafe place, you might not have your documents because documents are, I'm not sure I even mentioned that earlier, but helping folks with their IDs and birth certificates is another one of the really big pieces that we do, because if you're fleeing somewhere and you have to leave swiftly, a lot of times you don't have those items or they get stolen on the street, you know.
Well, again, Amy, thank you for your time and just being willing to share about your story a little bit, and just about the holiday season for
Can
those
I, if you don't mind, can I
that are in
speak to
need.
one more thing? I think it
Yeah,
was on here
absolutely. Oh yeah.
that I don't think we got to.
Yeah, please.
That one of the things we noticed was like 1 in 5 women experiencing homelessness are over the age of 62. And so I would say in the earlier years, I think when people thought of our services, they really thought of that young mom, but the reality is we see our largest demographic are women aged 35 to 44. And so then we also see a significant amount of people 50 and older, women in their 60s, 70s, and 80s.
Why do you
And
think
if
that is?
you, um, well, um, if violence for one, two, chronic health conditions. As you get older, if you're experiencing homelessness and you're in your 50s, you might physically be more like you're in your 70s. So it's harder to work, harder to maintain a job. If you're navigating mental illness, just the stability, it's just kind of a snowball effect. And we've seen a lot of elderly folks who are sometimes even scared to get the care they need. They've experienced racism, in services, in hospitals, and healthcare, and service providers, and people have lost a lot of trust in the systems that are supposed to support them.
That's tough. How do you guys, man, that it just amazes me, to be unhoused at that age, like you said, that's a challenge, and it's hard to work your way out of it too, as well. It seems like a longer road. Is that where you find they're kind of past working age, a lot of them? Or
Mm, that's a good question. I would think that a lot of times, sometimes, but then sometimes they're navigating, physical disabilities. Because just alone, if you're homeless, you're more than twice as likely to be disabled. So that's often a barrier too.
yeah, well, I think you guys are doing incredible work in the community and serving, like you said, an underserved population that we need to highlight and need to raise attention towards, and especially women and children. And so we appreciate you, Amy, appreciate your team, and again, appreciate you sharing your story, appreciate you sharing about UP. How can those that have listened, again, where can they go to support you as well as if they're interested in buying your book, your memoir, where can they
Uh,
go?
Oh, thank you. Okay, so
Yeah.
uplouisville.org is our website. There's a Make a Difference page that has options from our Amazon wish list to volunteering to financial donations. And then my book is available online at bookshop.org, Barnes and Noble, Amazon, Where the Light Breaks Through. So yeah, thank you. I really appreciate that and love the chance to have the conversation when I can connect with other partners and just speak about things that matter. So thank you.